Well, I'm a complete fool. I've been talking this whole time. I told you guys the secret meaning of life, but it was on mute this whole time, so I'm not going to bother repeating it. But it's good to see you. Ajay's here, Corbin's here, Sunny's here, Jose's here, Nick is here. So yeah, we've got a fun little stream today, hopefully. We have the sample competition, which, or not competition, but sample assignment, which people seem to enjoy all the time. Mike sounds good, which is awesome, so we'll do the next test. I'll tip $1 for that secret, make it $2, and I'll share it with you. So let's quickly do the audio test. Let's jump right in to see if we got good sounds here. So let me know whether the audio is good there. I was thinking my audio interface needed to be replugged. No, that was my own buffoonery once again. I'm always screwing around. I'm sure this time I'll also be scaring you guys with some volume incompetence once again, like always. Audio's good, awesome, so we'll jump right in. Yeah, hopefully you guys are doing good. Maybe slightly quiet, but possibly the beat. It was a bit, I think the beat was a bit quiet on my end too. Yeah, hopefully everything's going good with you guys. So yeah, this challenge is the sample challenge, where we are going to be, I gave you guys a sample. Thank you to Grout. I don't know if he's here right now, but thank you to him for sharing the sample. The idea with this challenge, or this assignment I should say, I need to start calling them assignments, is that you can't solely rely on the sample to provide all the musical pieces for your beat. You needed to program your own, whatever it may be, if you wanted to add your own melodies or chords, anything that's sort of musical in nature. This is something that I personally struggled with for a very long time. I found it very, very hard to like figure out how to add sounds onto samples. And I realized eventually a lot of it has to do with sample choice. I just wasn't choosing good samples. So yeah, I think this sample is very conducive to this challenge, in that it's just a little bit more minimal. It's not very large. I believe it's just like a Fender Rhodes playing. So yeah, hopefully you guys didn't struggle too much. Yeah, let me know in the chat whether you found this easy, medium, or hard to work with. The sample was awesome, but very hard for me personally. It was quite hard to get it in time and add effects. Do you use a sampler, Corbin? I'm interested whether you guys are using effect or samplers, or you're just raw dogging the samples in the playlist, and that's how you guys chop stuff up. Let me know. But yeah, we'll jump right into it. The next assignment, I'm very interested to see what you guys come up with. Nick says, I was super minimal with the sample, just took one bar section and played it forwards and in reverse as a texture throughout. Hey, that's equally as, I don't know what the word I'm thinking of here. Equally as effective, as long as you can make a beat out of it. Yeah, the next assignment for 2 weeks from now is find an old beat that you made in the past, remake it, and hopefully improve it. And then when you structure the beat, play the old beat for the first 10 to 20 seconds, and then have the new version come in. I think that's a cool little idea. I'm interested to see like the sort of before and after of what you guys come up with. Jose says, for me, it was hard. I just used a small sound for the melody. I think my creativity wasn't really there, but I tried, says Eric. Let's see what you guys have come up with. We'll start with, we'll start with Sunny's here. All right, that was Sunny's beat there. Let's see. Yeah, please feel free to share your opinions on the beats. It always helps to see what you guys are thinking about these beats as well, because you guys pick up on things that I don't sometimes. I used to, but couldn't seem to figure them out. Need to get Serato. Just took a section and recorded it to Edison as a one-shot and made chords with it. Okay, that's equally good a technique if it can be pulled off. But I tried to find some unique sounds. So Red Octane feels like the drum pattern, but odd timing issues here and there. Almost feels like a stutter or a BPM shift. I really struggled with Ear Candy lately, I think, says Sunny. Nice swing with the sample, but I feel like the timing issues also. Are those keys throughout chopped from the sample? If so, they are very nicely used. I'm impressed. Love the sample chops for sure. So yeah, with this beat here, I think you guys are picking up on a lot of the same issues that I am, which is the drums were sort of, whoops, sorry about that. I've already had a volume issue, possibly with smacking my mic. But yeah, I've sort of picked up on the drums sort of lagging here and there. I'm not sure exactly how that came to be. It seemed like for most of the loop, the drums were on point, and then whenever there were sort of like drum fills at times, when it got towards the end of the beat, at the end of the loop, the drums started to sort of not sync up with the sample. So I'm not sure whether the drums were programmed. It didn't seem like the drums were programmed on time, or I'm not sure how that could have happened. The beat itself, though, I think it sort of needed more textures overall to fill up more space. So I think with what was done with the sample was pretty well done. I think the sample chops worked for sure. A sort of nice feeling loop that Sunny built here. I think it sounded like it was pitched up, and so there's a sort of piece missing between the bass as well as a sort of melody which sat somewhat in the mid. So the low mid was a little bit empty. When the sample was pitched down, it sounded like the beat started to feel a little bit more complete, but nonetheless there were still spaces missing in the beat overall. There was almost no depth in the beat whatsoever. I think some sort of texture or something sort of coming in and out that sat somewhat in the background would have really helped fill the beat out a lot more. And I think overall the drums were just a little bit too transient for how the beat was sort of built. Like I mentioned, it was a very minimal beat, and so if you're going to sort of use the musical components in a little bit more of a minimal way, it can help to take your drums and make them a little bit more maximal. So choosing drum textures that are a little bit more sustained, for better lack of term, ones that last literally longer, maybe adding some noise or using very sort of dirty drums, and programming them in a way where you sort of have a lot more space filled, because the drums that were selected here, very short and very succinct, and so it just didn't feel like the drums took up enough space, the sample didn't take enough space. So I think overall, more space needed to be filled, I think. More mid, add depth, texture, and tighten up the drums. I wouldn't say tighten up the drums, I would say expand the drums so they take up a little bit more room. So that's a little bit more of a drum selection thing. I would recommend playing with the Beat Batter kit, any of them that come with a course, even if you just literally add a loop on top of your sample, you'll sort of start to feel see how big of a difference it can make, just having a lot more space filled up in your beat by the drums. So there's a lot of different ways that you could have added more into this beat and took up more room. I'm not saying you have to do all those things, but I definitely do think that adding more mid would probably be one of the things that I would do first. And that's unfortunately one of the hardest things to do, to add like a chord progression underneath your sample. Can be very, very difficult. Say maybe I should do a video on that. That's an idea that I'll consider. But yeah, really good chopping there. I think the beat just needed a little bit more steps forward in terms of space being filled. Soju Moju, let's see what Soju's got for us. All right, that was Soju Moju's beat there. Very nice flip. Mixture Mom's here. How's it going? Good to see you back with the gang. You can't stay long, but nonetheless, it's good to see you. Smooth drop for sure. Love the spacey melody you made. Very nice bass pattern, says Jose. I really like what the snaps do for bringing attention to the pillars of the beat. That's interesting. I didn't even pick up on the snaps in the background, so that's good attention to detail there. I agree, bass pattern is really good. I think the texture of vinyl distortion could be a bit more random. Yeah, snaps add more of a percussion with a reverb on them, brings a lot to it. Compressing is, again, something. So I think with this beat, I'm very impressed with how well the additional sounds that were added into the beat integrated with a sample. Let's quickly play the sample here. It's just basically very basic Fender Rhodes with a sample ultimately. And we have some melodic components on the top there. But yeah, with the way Soju used the sample and integrated his own sounds, really good. Simple chops were used here. He didn't go overboard. Very elegant design overall, so I think that was very well done. I love the sort of ethereal feel to the beat. I think what was the sort of intent of the beat felt very on point with what was created. I really got a good feel of like what the idea is behind the beat overall. There were a couple of things I think I would make an adjustment to. I think the snare choice was, I mean, it's hard to say, it could be completely subjective, but I feel like the snare didn't really fit with the beat really. I guess there's a little bit of a mismatch between the snare and the the hi-hat. The hi-hat's very like short, transient, very high pitched, whereas the snare, it sounds like a regular snare just pitched way down. It doesn't really sound like an actual snare. It doesn't really match with the sort of aesthetic that the hi-hat provides, in that it's kind of prolonged, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, I guess overall it's just a mismatch between those two textures. That sort of jumped out to me. A little bit of a subjective thing. I think, as a lot of people mentioned, I did like the attention to the detail with the bass pattern. That's sort of there's a lot of movement with the bass pattern, but I think during those parts where you sort of created that riff, that sort of more complex part of your bass pattern, I would recommend playing with the velocity a little bit. It sounded like the velocity of all those notes, when you have that very complex part of the bass pattern, they're all at an equal level. Just like I mentioned in the chorus, whenever you have a part of your bass pattern that has a little bit more movement, or any real pattern, it can help to really minimize and decrease some of the velocity of those sounds, just so it feels it just doesn't feel overbearing. It doesn't feel unnatural. So that's something that you can try to play with your bass pattern. Maybe if it was a little bit louder, didn't catch that right away, but it does seem to sit in the background. Wish there was more crack to it. Yeah, it sort of sits in a little bit of a low space, and it sounds a bit unnatural in a way. I'm not sure how this snare was created, but it sounds like a normal snare just pitched a little bit down. Could be wrong though, if it sounds kind of digital. But yeah, overall, I really love the sample and the way it was used. Just very smart design. Didn't go completely overboard with creating tons of unnecessary chops. So I really love the bass idea with this beat. And yeah, a lot of attention to detail, which is awesome. So yeah, great job, Soju Moju. I think those are just two little things there that you can start playing around with to sort of help elevate the beat. For you guys, this is a question. Do you guys think about sort of pairing textures together when it comes to drum textures? Or do you just like, is it a sort of random feeling to it? Because I guess for me, if I have a little bit more of a transient, very digital sounding hi-hat, I'll sort of want to keep that aesthetic in mind for like my snare and my kick, and sort of keep a consistent sort of aesthetic with my drum sounds. Or do you guys like to mix and match? Maybe you'll get like a grimy boom bap snare with it's very digital trap-esque hi-hat. Typically, I don't know, I feel like whenever I hear beats that have a sort of mismatch of drums textures, it just doesn't necessarily tie together. Primarily, it could be because the way they're programmed just doesn't necessarily fit right with like a very boom bap type of snare. It's going to sit on the 2 and the 4, and since it's just so large, that's sort of where the only place it could sit. If you sort of tried to make a very trap-esque drum pattern with a boom bap snare that just has a lot of rolls and stuff, it just wouldn't necessarily sound great. So maybe that's why this sort of mismatch idea just doesn't really work well. I'm still learning, but I kind of like mixing things up. Yeah, I mean, I sort of used to do that as well, but I found that eventually that was one of the big issues I was sort of creating for myself and for my beats. I think I definitely go with my intuition and what feels right to me. Most definitely, if I'm going for more trap-esque, I feel you need those elements. If going for dirtier sounds, I feel digital hats and snares don't fit. Think a lot about pairing, but try to use different stuff just to see. Yeah, I just don't want to sit here and say like never pair different types of snares and hi-hats together or anything like that. That's very antithetical to creativity, but it does end up undermining certain sort of beat aesthetics. And if you're trying to make a beat that's very trap-esque, jumping around with different types of snares and playing with different sort of categories of sounds can sometimes undermine the beat overall. I don't know. That's something that maybe we'll consider as we listen to more of these beats to see if we have any of those types of issues jumping out. Anyways, let's listen to Mixture Mom's beat next. All right, that was Orange Daydream by Mixture Mom. Is Mixture Mom still here, or did they leave? Deleg's here. How's it going, Deleg? I still play around a lot for the most part, stick within the genre. Never know what will fit though. Say with this beat, nice, like the perks, like the bounce. I like the textures in the background. Groovy. This style is crazy. Keep it up. Oh, you're still here. I was really trying to find my bounce this time. I think those little bass slides I'm hearing, maybe percussion, it really, but really like the bounce it adds. Yeah, this beat was fantastic. Those percussive layers that you have underneath, so awesome. It sounds, I'm not sure whether that was like a bass slide or whether it was like a pitched up tom that you maybe played with the sliding or something, but such a unique sound there. Eric says, you find it reminds me of Pharrell. Very nice percussion. I think some elements could be louder, says Jose. Yeah, so fantastic rhythm, very avant-garde approach, just across the board. Now that Harmiter mentioned, a very sort of Pharrell type of thinking and just really making a very rhythmically unique sound and sort of shaping the sounds around that sort of rhythmic idea. Like, for me, these types of beats I find very difficult to make. Yeah, it was a bass slide. Oh, interesting. But yeah, this was fantastic. I sort of got the feel to the beat. It really reminds me of like a Stone's Throw type of beat, of sort of West Coast beat. I don't know if anyone here remembers like Blue or MED or something. But yeah, awesome beat. I really like the structure of the beat as well. You sort of came in and out with a sample instead of just playing the sample consistently. Again, just very unique thinking, and I think this beat was really, really amazing to me. I think the levels were honestly okay. So Jose mentioned that some elements could be louder. For me, I didn't really feel like anything jumped out to me as a little bit too quiet, which is something that you and I have talked about before we worked on. I think all your sounds here were at an appropriate level. It really made sense what you were doing. perfect, enough room for an artist to come in and actually use this and just really own the beat, but still have the beat just be so unique with what you've built that it still has its own personality. Yeah, I have nothing sort of critical or negative to say about this beat. That was an awesome beat. I really loved listening to that. So good job. Levels sounded good on my end, says Red Octane. Yeah. So let's jump next to Link's beat here. All right, that was Links there. Let me just quickly finish what I was writing. You guys can share what you thought. I love the top line melody you added to the sample. Wish the drums came through a little bit more though, says Corbin. So yeah, I think I agree with what you mentioned here. Once again, we have that sort of mismatch of drums. That's something I'm sort of paying attention to now. And the sort of snare, I think the snare actually fit the aesthetic for what was built here. Eric says some swing in the drums would be cool too. But the hi-hat was just very short, very trap-esque, and it sort of didn't fill up much room in the beat. I do think this beat had a little bit more space filled with the additional sounds that were added in, like the keys. So just like Corbin mentioned, I really liked what was built and programmed with the sort of top line piano and the sort of strings that you sort of had coming in and out. I really, really liked. Jose says, I love the melody that you added. Yeah, like velocity and variation in regards to the drums. So yeah, I think overall though, there's a little bit of bass lacking. So the way that you use the sample here, there's a lot of parts where the sample was sort of just repeating the same thing over and over again, and then you had the piano on top sort of providing a melody, which is nice. But I think the bass, it sounded like, was the sort of instrument that was guiding what's happening in the sort of low end and really providing the overall fundamental direction of like the progression fundamentally. But I think the bass itself was just not very loud and very present. So it kind of felt like the beat was a bit aimless because that fundamental sound that was supposed to provide a lot, which is the sort of fundamental progression of the beat, was just so quiet. So I think really pumping up the bass, maybe adding a little bit more color just so it feels a little bit more central in the beat, I think that could have done wonders for this beat overall. I think the bass texture that you used was a little bit subby, so I think adding a little bit more texture would have been helpful, or just changing it to maybe like more of an acoustic type of bass. It's just hard to hear, so I can't really give advice to whether it was an appropriate bass or not. Eric says the dark feel was really dope. The piano felt like it could use more effects to darken it more, but that feels nitpicky. Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea if you just sort of carved off with some of the high end, added a little bit more delay, but that I think isn't the sort of main issue at hand here. Maybe some vinyl noise, says Red Octane. Yeah, I think those little details would definitely be nice, but I do think the sort of huge underlying sound, which is meant to guide this sort of beat along, was just a little bit lacking. So I think adding a lot more bass to the beat would have really helped. But overall, I really do think the way you sort of used the sample was well put together, especially with the sounds that you sort of programmed yourself. So I think this beat, doing the type of stuff that Lynx was doing with this beat, was something that I had a lot of difficulty doing, just adding my own sounds onto the beat. So well done in that regard. I think just playing with levels and sort of making sure you have that very prominent sound that's meant to guide the beat along actually be loud enough to guide the beat along. I think that could have definitely helped the beat overall. Let's see what Nick has for us. Look at that dog. All right. That's Nick's song there. Loki found a stick on our walk yesterday, and that discovery inspired this track. Very nice. That feels like the type of music that would go through a dog's head if he found a nice, juicy, tasty stick. So that works. I love the vibe. The piano could have a little sauce on it to make it sparkle. I like the uplifting style for sure. Did you play the piano along with this? Maybe the headphones responders, but I feel like it's lacking some low end. Yeah, I played it all through a MIDI controller. The electronic 8-bit video game style didn't fit, in my opinion. Sounds like you did some Herbie Hancock piano. Good job. I think I agree with Red Octane. I think Nick is very, very proficient at playing the piano and really composing these sort of full ideas. Sunny says, I like the melody, but but it was that a digital sound and the piano were more similar in sound, maybe adding some distortion, bit crushing on the more raw initial piano. So I'll take this beat for what it is in terms of it feels more like a sort of soundtrack type of song, not necessarily like a beat that an artist would use. Yeah, more like something from like a movie or like a score from an uplifting scene in a movie of some sort. So with the way the sample was used, like Nick mentioned, he did a very smart thing of just playing a small slice backwards and then forwards, and you basically create like a very consistent pad, which then, since it's so simple and so basic and easy to work with, you can come in and create your own ideas like Nick did here, which is very very smart, very makes your life a lot easier to program your own sounds and textures on top. And I think Nick did a great job of creating his own sort of vision and sort of pattern with his piano and the strings and everything. I really got what the song was going for, and I think that was executed very, very well. I think one of the things that I'll mention here is that this is something that I mentioned last week. I'm not sure, Nick, you mentioned that you weren't here last week, but with one of the other members' beats, they were using a very strong, consistent sound throughout the entire beat, and that ends up taking up a lot of room. So with your song here, the strings were just very, very present. You sort of had a very long sustained string that was providing the progression throughout the entire song. And when you use that type of texture throughout the entire song, it's very hard to like add more and have it feel sort of balanced in a way. For example, I really liked when the song minimized towards the end here, and having more of those types of moments throughout the entire song would have been nice. But I think dropping some of the more prominent large sounds like the string would have been necessary to do that. Overall, it just felt like this track was very, very high in terms of like the amount of energy, just because there's so many textures in the sound, or sorry, in the song. I think just minimizing a little bit could have sort of helped to get sort of create an up and down feeling, create some variation in the song overall. So if that's something that you struggle with, I would say that playing around with a little bit less sustained textures and introducing more transient sounds into your beat or your song as a sort of cornerstone would have been a good way to sort of be even more flexible with your song and take it to different places without sort of being stuck in this sort of big, very established large song that you sort of have to sort of fight against to add more textures into your beat. So pull things away and kind of make a listener listen for the phantom limb, sort of. Yeah, I think that's an interesting way of putting it, the phantom limb. So with like, this is true of any art, I would say. Like when you watch a movie, if it's just nonstop action throughout the entire movie, you're just like, okay, this is kind of over the top and like not as fun to watch. It's the sort of context that you create when you have more dull moments of where things slow down, where you can sort of breathe a little bit and then you pick it back up. And I think a song is no different. If you have a very large part of the song that has a lot of textures and a lot going on, sort of creating these moments throughout the song where things sort of minimize here and there can really help you keep the sort of listener engaged. So I think that is the sort of way I think about it. Overall, though, like I mentioned, you did a great job of creating your own musical idea here. This feels like a composition, a sort of musical soundtrack. So was that the intention? I think that's a good question to ask as well. Or do you view this as just like a hip-hop type of beat? Because if that was the case, I think really, really minimizing how much you created with that song would sort of start to be necessary if your intention here was to make it more of an actual hip-hop beat. While you answer that, let's jump into Corbin's beat. That was a Mutation by Cora Beats. Haven't tried too much low tempo stuff, but was inspired by a song that was just too damn hard. I'm curious what that song was. Please feel free to share it with the rest of us. Unique techniques, says Harmiter. Harmiter, I've noticed that you didn't submit this assignment. Any reason why? Just too busy? Or amazing basses, says Jose. Cool switch up, says Sunny. Love that bass. Also nice fills. Hard damn, this beat got me nodding. Nice drum fills, says Jose. I even pick up on the nice drum fills. So yeah, I really do think that first off, a great job of tying your own ideas in with a sample. I couldn't even really pick up what you did with a sample, but that's not necessarily like that was definitely something that was allowed with this assignment. So I think you did a great job of really taking the sample and sort of making it your own and creating your own idea. So that was very well done, and sort of just bring in your own textures as well to sort of have your own intention lead the beat and have the sample play a sort of supplemental role. That's something that sometimes I even struggle with. When I grab a sample, I always want to make it the sort of predominant sound, but sometimes forcing yourself to make it a little bit more secondary and creating your own sounds as a sort of main piece can really make for a awesome beat idea. So I think I applaud you on this one. No Run to Your Mama by Tech 9. All right. Inspired by Darude Sandstorm. All right. That too. Haven't heard that one. For sure, got the underground vibe. Yeah, I got too much going on. Fair enough. Agreed with the underground vibe. I love the bass wobble. That was a really cool idea. I always love to hear very awesome ideas like that, where we all take this sort of sounds that we use for granted, but really pushing the sounds that are very basic and making them unusual and unique is always awesome to hear. I really love that. My landlord cut 2 months off my vacate time. Jeez Louise, 2 months. Landlord? How does a landlord have control of vacation? Like Sunny mentioned in the chat as well, great switch ups. I think the one thing that sort of jumped out to me with this beat, I guess I would have to hear how an artist would sound on it, so it would depend, but I felt like the drums, the bass were very sort of central, sitting in the middle, and that's exactly where it's supposed to be. I felt as though like the additional sounds from much of the beat, they were very detached in a way. They were very, very ethereal. They were very stereo. They were didn't have as much of that low end presence to help sort of ground the beat, and I felt that there's a little bit of a distance between the sort of core sounds like the drum and the bass and the musical sounds that were sort of just sitting a little bit far apart. So I think even if you took like one of the additional textures that you had there and you made it a little bit more dry, brought it a little bit more closer to the foreground, a little bit more to the center, I think that could have made the beat feel a little bit more tied together. But that just might be my own listening situation here. Just a small thing. I really do think this beat idea was very unique. I really loved what you did with that weird weeping sound that was sort of driving the core. That's like the sort of POI in my opinion. But yeah, let me know in the chat whether you guys picked up on like a sort of detached feeling in the beat. Maybe it's hard to describe it. But once again, with Quora, I feel like I have to take that extra step to nitpick and really push. So yeah, I think just the overall lack of a sort of sound somewhat sitting in the middle, that might be something that I felt was not vacation. She needs us out to renovate the apartment. Oh, that's infuriating. That would annoy me quite a bit if someone sprung that on me. Sorry to hear that, man. Let's listen to Rob's beat, since Eric mentioned that this is a true heater. So let's see what Robbie boy has for us.
I'm going to introduce you to a rather remarkable man.
All right. That was Rob's beat. We haven't seen submit a beat in a while, and he's not even here. It takes me out of my music time zone. I feel the same way. I sort of need a very consistent, sort of unfettered environment in order to feel comfortable enough to make music. Like if I have to go out like 3 hours later, I feel like I just can't get relaxed enough to make music. So having something like consistently volatile like that would really, really throw me off. That might have been what threw me off. Didn't think to bring the melody in a bit. I felt a slight disconnect, but not used to a slow tempo. Yeah, that's why I sort of mentioned, like, it depends on what the artist does. If they were very, very slow tempo, that might really make the beat feel sort of dragging along. But again, I'm just sort of nitpicking. I'm not 100% gonna say that that was like an absolute failure by any means. Like the beat was still awesome. Nice little movement in the sonic of the melody here and there. Definitely can hear an artist on this. I think if the drum pattern had a couple more fills and switch ups, this would be a banger. Wish it was longer to build the idea more in range. Love to hear a switch up. Was feeling what he had down though. I don't want to talk over Rob's beat. The whistle high end reminds me a lot of a Tyler vibe. So yeah, this beat was awesome. Rob, I wish Rob was here so I could virtually kiss him. So yeah, I did a one-on-one with Rob a while back, and I'm happy to hear that many of the struggles that Rob seemingly had at that time are cured. Overall, just an awesome idea. I have no idea how he got to this beat from that sample. A lot of manipulation, obviously, a lot of contorting of the sample, but definitely created his own idea here. Very original sound. Personally, I love the drum work. I know you guys mentioned that you guys would have liked a little bit more drum fills and whatnot. I think I'm not someone who sort of penalizes for a lack of drum fills just because in a lot of beats, I guess it depends on like what the intent is. To me, this sounds like it would work very, very well for an artist. Just have a lot of room. Like the idea is there. The beat sounds full enough, especially with a great drum work, the drum textures. They went a far distance in filling up a lot of the beat. I think the beat sounds completely full, and I think this is a great example of that sort of mismatch idea of drum textures, where imagine if this beat had a more transient trap type of hi-hat. I think the beat just would not feel quite as full, but I think using that more acoustic type of hi-hat here paired with that very dense snare just worked perfectly. Yeah, for sure has that OF vibe. So yeah, I think awesome melodic idea as well. It sounded like, I'm not sure exactly what that was on top that sort of came in every now and again. It sounded like Rob used the sample but sort of created a glide with a sample, or maybe like a pitch bend effect. I think maybe that's what the sort of sample use was in this beat. Overall, though, I think there's not much I can sort of nitpick. If I had to, I would say to just add a small layer of detail, or say small layer of noise on top, just because the drums were very grimy, very dirty, which again, no problem at all with that. It fits into the aesthetic and the sort of main sound in the beat. Outside of that melodic component, it was sort of pushed down to lower frequencies. So just using a small little layer of noise can really help fill up that sort of missing high end. But overall, though, awesome beat. Eric has to go. Sorry to see you go, Eric. I can play your beat real quick, hopefully, if you are still here. But yeah, Rob, if you're watching this, good job, and I look forward to hearing what you come up with next beat. So yeah, Eric, if you want to stick around, let's listen to your beat. All right, that was Eric the Dishwasher's beat there. Very intergalactic, says Mixter Mom. I like the hi-hat pattern, but I think it's like reverb on them or something. Maybe turning down the mix would make them more snappy. Love how open and yet plenty of rhythm for the artist to play with. Yeah, the more I listen, the hats seem a little bit far back. This is really cool. Sorry, no feedback. I kind of like that the perk is in a different space. That perk was very 3-6 Mafia. Nice different sounds around the sample. Makes a lot of space. Really liking the effect on the bass during certain parts to fill up the frequency space and then chill out for the meat of it. Yeah, I really liked the sort of towards the end when the beat minimized a tiny bit more and that sort of bass took over a little bit more. That's when the beat really felt like it came together. With this beat, I really do like the sort of core fundamental piece that was sort of sitting underneath. I think what Eric built was very, very well put together. I think I know Eric has struggled. I remember when he first joined, it felt like there's a lot of different sounds that were just going all over the place. I think this was a very consistent idea here that was very well structured in terms of all the different pieces that were sort of needed to make everything come together. I think this shows a lot of growth with Eric's journey here. I think what some of you guys are saying in terms of the hi-hat issue, I think for me, like I mentioned, I really liked when the beat minimized a bit more. I think throughout most of the first section of the beat, Eric had that, it sounded like a sort of synth key that was sitting on top to sort of fulfill what the assignment asked, which is to play your own layer on top. That sound was very, very prominent, whereas the core sort of idea from the sample was a little bit more pushed back. I think swapping those two sounds, or those two layers, would have been a better idea. Making the sample that sort of very beautiful, lush Fender Rhodes be a little bit more the prominent sound that's more in the spotlight, and making that sort of synth key a little bit more supplemental would have been a good idea. I think that would have really helped the beat come together, just because that synth key was kind of overpowering in a way. And I think overall, even with the hi-hats, that could have been something that could have been sort of swapped around too, making the hi-hats a little bit less primary, a little bit more secondary in the beat, and just pulling that sample a little bit more forward and making that a little bit more of the star of the show. I think that could have really helped bring the beat together in terms of an overall balance. Like I mentioned, though, this beat had all the right components in it, and I think even just pushing the beat down to be a little bit more minimal and saving that synth key for like the hook, for example, and just having that main loop play with that sort of awesome colorful bass and the sort of frenetic hi-hats, if you just sort of reel it in a little bit more, I think that would have been a fantastic idea. So yeah, that was my takeaway, Eric. I think Eric's made a lot of progress. It's really awesome to hear his ideas actually come together and make for a very consistent, understandable beat. So this is really awesome to hear. This is a fantastic job, Eric. I'm really excited to hear what you guys have with the second assignment. That's going to be awesome. So we are an hour into the stream. Let me take a sip of my water, and we'll keep going. Let me know what's going on in your guys' lives. I'm going to be moving in 2 months. So I'm going to be moving back to Toronto. That's going to be a heck of a road trip. So I got to like crank out and produce like 8 videos in the next 2 months. So that's going to be a little bit stressful. Just so I have enough stuff, because I have to pack up all my stuff 2 weeks before then. And then I have a wedding to go to in Europe in July. So like there's a month when I'm going to be completely away from everything. So I got to make sure all my junk is in order. Nick, do you live in Toronto? Oh, maybe we can have a sort of a producer meetup. Is that frosted glass or plastic? Where? Oh, this thing? This thing's plastic, extra chemicals. I got it from Amazon. It's probably killing me. It doesn't have the BPA symbol on it, I just realized. So I'm probably drinking plastic as we speak. The reason why I got this is because it has the sort of time labels on it. And otherwise, I'll be... I completely forget when to drink water, and then my stomach starts hurting during the night. And end up shitting my pants. So that's why I need that water bottle. So let's keep on trucking. Let's hear what Jose's got for us. All right, that was Jose's beat there. I think that's the second or third beat I've heard from Jose. I'll be panhandling on the streets of Boston. Come on now, Eric. Don't be spiraling like that. Imagine running into me at the grocery store. That's true. I prefer to do my grocery store shopping when the senior folks are out, like during the day. That way I avoid the rush, and I have some lovely interactions with some old folks. Just last week, I was at the grocery store struggling to figure out how to open up the bags that you put fruits in. I was like standing there trying to pull apart that piece of crap bag, and then two older folks came along. I was like, "Here, let me help you out, Sonny," and they opened it up for me, and it was very nice. I was very happy. Yeah, I'll be moving in with my girl. You don't know where you'd be without your girl. A mess. You have a 1 gallon one. That would be nice. Is yours chemically safe? If so, forward me the link to where you got yours from, because I would like to replace this one, because now I'm scared that I realize that it doesn't have the safety logos on it. Robbie's here. Robbie, I've reviewed your beat. You got top marks. So good job. I said if you were here, I would give you a kiss. So that's my kiss to you, Rob. For me, it was hard to find some unique sound from the sample. Gotta start dumpster diving to make rent. Is it, what do you say? Is it expensive in Toronto? Because I lived there 3 years ago now, so I'll be coming back. Pro tip, use the water they use to spray the fruits and veggies to wet your finger and open up the bag. So would I have to like stand and wait for them to spray it? Why don't you just lick your finger at that point? I don't understand. Why do you have to use the water that they spray the fruits and veggies? So yeah, with Jose's beat here, great job of using the sample. It sounded like you used the sample to create that very consistent sound that you put on the stereo ends of the beat. So you sort of had your very consistent sound there, but you didn't fall into the trap of just creating a very monotone type of beat. I think you did a good job of introducing your own progression. So you had your own chord progression and your own bass progression. And so you did an awesome job of using the sample as just a small layer in the beat, and you're really introducing your own sounds and your own ideas. So that was really, really well done. I remember the last time I reviewed your beat, I mentioned that some of the sounds in your beat were a little bit low and the overall balance was a little bit off. I did not feel that with this beat. I think the levels with this beat here are very, very good. I think you did a great job of making sure all the different sounds were at a good level. Everything's felt like it sat in the right place. You had a very unique rhythm with this beat, that sort of 3-3-2 rhythm, that drill type of rhythm, and you also had those sort of sliding 808 notes. Great transition noises throughout in order to get from one section to another. I really like that switch up at the end as well, when you sort of replaced that synth bell or the synth keys that you had, and you sort of slightly changed it for the end piece. I think overall I don't really have anything negative to say about this beat, Jose. Compared to the sort of issues that I mentioned with the last submission that you had with the levels, it sounds like you've got a hold of it and you're doing a great job there. So you said the last feedback helped a lot. So yeah, it's awesome to hear. It sounds like you've solved that problem. So I'm interested to hear what you do for the next assignment. I hope you can sort of participate. And from there, I sort of want to hear what ideas you come up with next to maybe push you along even further. Because from what I hear with this beat, it sounds like you have the fundamentals down, and the structuring of this beat also great. You sort of had your ups and downs in here, and you sort of pulled back on the beat, made it a little bit more minimal. So I'd like to see in which ways I can sort of push you along with the next assignment. So yeah, good job, Jose. All you need is slight condensation on the master. Was this a new production technique I haven't heard of? Really stoked to hear the next beats. Great progress for sure. Yeah, it's always awesome. That's part of the reason why I wanted to make that challenge, because I always love hearing how much progress you guys have made. So yeah. I think I mentioned this last stream. I'm going to start setting up the next full-on competition, the one where you can win prizes. So that's going to start. My thinking is I'm going to start that right before I leave to Toronto. And then by the time I get back, there'll be like a month gap, which is usually how much time I give you guys for each competition. So hopefully that sort of lines up. So it's going to be mid-June. I'll be creating the competition, and then mid-July is when the competition will end. So clear your schedules, people. Eric, let's see what you got here. All right, that was at 17. Sample challenge by Eric. Eric, I would say overall that was a bit of a miss. I know you're capable of making good beats, but I think all the sounds were off key. It sounded like you had your sample layer and then you tried to program your own piano on top. Unfortunately, that was playing sort of it's doing its own thing compared to what the sample was doing, and same thing with the vocal chops. Even though I would say the sounds that were sort of used here in terms of sitting in the right spaces and filling up the beat, I think the beat felt very full. It was just that the notes that were used here were just very off. And Red Octane, you pointed out something also, some of the timing of some of the piano notes was a little bit off too. So I think overall it seems like the struggle here was just pairing a sample with your own sounds and sort of programming something that makes musical sense. When I run into the situation and when I first started to actually try to force myself to learn how to play my own sounds on top of my own samples, simplifying one or the other, that's the sort of easier way to make sure you don't run into this exact problem that you had here. The sample was a crazy key. I was getting E Phrygian. So yeah, I think with the way that you chop up the sample or the way that you program your sort of melody on top or your chord progression on top or underneath, simplify one or the other. So with the sample that you chose here, it had a lot of moving parts, a lot of movement, a lot of different notes in it. And you sort of tried to do the exact same thing with the piano pattern. You didn't sort of just create something very simple. That also had a very sort of complex ambition towards what you created here. And whenever I tried to do that, I would always muck up my beat. So overall, this is something that I mentioned in the course as well. You need sort of musical variation. If one pattern is going to be simple, make another one complex. And I think for your approach here was that maybe you sort of unknowingly created or used this sample in a very complex way, and you sort of did your piano arrangement the same way as well. Eric says, not totally agree. I really struggled with this sample and finding what would fit without leaving the sample doing all the work. Don't feel guilty about letting the sample do a lot of the work, even if you just add your own small little sounds here and there. Honestly, that's something that I can sort of feel in me sometimes when I just let the sample do a lot of heavy lifting and I'm just adding small little pieces on top. But at the end of the day, like I always say, like, don't let your ego get in the way of making a good beat, because I mean, that's all that really matters at the end of the day. Is it good or not? If the way you got there was a breeze, a brisk walk, or climbing up a mountain, the listener doesn't care. You don't get points for attempts. This isn't figure skating, so don't feel bad about letting the sample do all the work. If you have to sort of add your own layer on top and make it really simple, what I'm more interested in is if the beat actually works and it sounds good, if all the sounds fill up the right spaces. And like I mentioned, the sounds that you used here, they did sound like they fill up a good amount of space and the beat felt very full. It was just a lot of your melodic pieces were just doing their own thing. So like you mentioned, you even knew that going in. So yeah, my advice is don't be afraid to be simple with one of the layers. If you try to make everything as complex as possible, things can go loopy really quick. Grout Dog, you mentioned that you weren't able to finish your beat, but let's take a listen to what you got here. right, that's Groutmeister's beat. It's a work in progress. Not sure if he likes it in its current form. Let's see here. I really like this, says Rob. Lacking some high end, I feel. Seems a little bit muddy and distorted. As always, love his sound manipulation and chops. The idea is super sick. Def lacking the high end, but he said it's unfinished, so I don't know if he would have gotten to it or not. I still struggle using Wave Candy. Still feel like I don't know what of the heat highlighted notes to use. That might be something I could address in a video one day. For me, whenever I use Wave Candy, I just sort of use that as a baseline for getting a handful of notes to use. But overall, like, I used to be super intimidated when it comes to like which notes am I supposed to use with my sample and whatnot. Overall, it's made it a little bit more easy when I finally realized, there's only 12 possibilities when it comes to which notes work with your sample. You don't need to sort of figure out every single sort of chord or melodic idea that you need. Just getting a handful of notes and just starting off small and simple can be a great way to start. Just figure out, like, when you're at like the beginning of your loop, okay, what can be a small little 3-note riff that I can add here, and sort of just taking it step by step, as opposed to like walking in and having this feeling that like you have to make this huge melodic masterpiece with the sound. Just taking it step by step with a handful of notes and just go from there. I think that might be an approach that you can sort of try to use. Yeah, I'm sure he'd definitely throw a multi-band compressor on it and adjust overall EQ. Wave Candy just helps you narrow it down. Yeah, I think that's a great way to sort of think about it. So I think with the beat of Grouts here, really awesome sound design as always. I really love the sort of melodic ideas with sample, as well as a weird manipulation that was done to it. As always, really cool, unique idea. I really love the drum textures as well, and all the small little effects that were used. It sounded like there was like distortion that came in and out. This to me really felt like a standalone type of beat. Somewhat reminded me, I know Rob, you're here, this is what we talked about before. Grout has somewhat of a similar style to some of Shamana's beats. Very sort of like a spacey, ethereal type of feel with some like bad ass sort of hard hitting low end. But I think overall, one of the things that maybe you sort of struggled with this beat is that there was a bit of a sort of lack of a progression in the sort of beat. I know you had this sort of very consistent bass playing over and over again, which isn't obviously a bad thing. But it sounded like even in those sort of low mids, there was no progression. So there's no progression with the bass. There's no progression with the sort of low mid. There's no sort of like chord progression underneath. You had a lot of movement with the sort of melodic elements that definitely sounded awesome. But I think even if you just like grabbed one single sort of note or instrument that sort of sits in the low mid and just create some little switch up, some little progression that sort of exists in the lower, the low mid or the low, I think that could have helped the beat sort of feel like it had a little bit more of a direction, just because while there was this sort of cool ethereal feeling up in the high end, I think that that sort of lack of overall direction might be one of the things that made you feel unsatisfied with this beat. And I think with the way that the sample was used, maybe that sort of got in the way, because I know that sort of sat in the low mid, and it sounded like there was a consistent tone that sat underneath the sample that was playing the exact same note throughout. I might have to listen back to that beat, but I think that was my sort of takeaway. It just didn't feel like the beat had a sort of progression that went one way or another. So yeah, really cool idea, really cool effects, Grout. I think just maybe the sample and sort of having to use it may have gotten in the way of the sort of idea fundamentally. If you were able to like institute your own progression into this beat, maybe it would have sort of came together more like you wanted. Deleg, let's see what you got for us. Interesting. So that's Deleg's beat there. Oh man, I like this as Nick. The vocal chops are great, and that heavy and that is a heavy kick. Yeah, this is nasty. Love the kick. Plenty of room for an artist too, I feel. Heavy kick. Wish the snare was more prominent though, says a Red Octane. So with this beat, I liked where the sample sat when it was sort of pitched up. It sounded like really cool, having that sort of beautiful high-pitched Fender Rhodes. Nice vocal chop. It really kept me engaged the whole way through. The vocal sample also was really nice. It sat perfectly with the sample itself. I really enjoyed the drums. Loved how colorful they all were, and a lot of sort of a little bit more detail with the drums. I noticed there's a little bit of padding with the hi-hats, for example. The drums took up a lot of space, and I really like that. I think this beat overall somewhat suffers a similar issue, which is that there was a lack of progression. There's no sound that sat in the low mid just because the sample was pitched so high. There's no sort of bass that sort of led where the beat was going. There was no chord progression that led where the beat was going. It was just a series of melodic notes with some very cool sounding drums. Even something as simple as like grabbing a Reese bass, even if it isn't like a very prominent loud sound, just like grabbing a bass and just creating like a very simple progression could have really brought in a sort of direction to this beat, because as of right now with what was created, it felt a little bit directionless. Like the part of the beat where it sort of started to pitch down at the very beginning, it sort of sat in a very cool spot. Let me see if I can find it here. So that brief little second there, you'll notice the sample sitting in that sort of low mid area. I think that having that sort of balance would have worked very well. Same thing with the very end here. We start to have the sort of frequency presence in that low mid, but during the actual beat itself, it's pitched very high, and we sort of have a sort of missing piece there that doesn't really isn't filled up with anything. It sort of lacks that the sort of no sound that provides that direction. People underestimate Reese basses in hip hop or EDM. Sounds great in general. I love adding EDM sounds. Yeah, I'm the same way. Even if it doesn't provide like a very subby if you use a respace that doesn't provide like that sort of low end, even just using it as a small little texture in the beat. You know what? I'm gonna play a beat for you real quick here. It's a beat that I worked on recently for a tutorial. So there's one sound in here that sort of sits in that low mid, and I want you to hear what a big difference this sound made. Let me window capture. FL Studio. All right, let me hopefully open this up. So I'm going to remove this sound here. So take a listen to the beat and how it sounds a little bit incomplete without this texture. And then once I bring in this texture, which is just a very normal string sound here, the beat starts to sound a lot more complete. So yeah, just having some sound sit in that space, that low mid space, can go a long way and making your beat feel a lot more full and complete. So this is something that I talked about way back. Don't underestimate how much that small little texture there. It's not like adding a ton of bass in the beat or anything like that. It's not meant to like be the star of the show by any means. It's a very utilitarian sound, but it just goes a long way in adding some sound into the beat, and also helps provide this sort of progression. It's just a very simple 2-bar progression, 2-note progression, but it really helps reinforce that progression just with how it sits in that space. So yeah, hopefully that was a good example that makes sense. Moha, let's see what you got here. All right, that was Moha's beat there. Moha is very experienced with sampling, as you can hear. Saw Microshift being loaded. What exactly does it do? I can't seem to catch what it does, but feel it when using it. So it sounds like it just basically creates a lot of stereo presence. I think it slightly shifts one of your notes and then pushes both to the extreme left and right. And that's how you sort of get a lot of stereo separation from a sound, just because if you take the exact same sound, pan it extremely left, extremely right, they both sort of equal out and it sounds like it's in the middle. From my understanding, from what I can hear, what Microshift does is it sort of pushes one of those sounds. Like if you use it on a hi-hat, it becomes very, very apparent, where it just adds a ton of space, or sorry, tons of stereo separation on your sound. And it does so by slightly moving the actual, slightly shifting the actual note itself, or at least one of them. I think that's how they accomplish it. Yeah, it isn't the driving force and not very loud, but it fills up so much of that frequency space. So yeah, that's sort of the importance of creating some sound in the low mid, just because it can just fill up so much frequency space and bring like all the sounds together in a way. Love the panning on the top line melody and that flute coming in and out. Very cohesive. Huge fan of this one. Nice use of vocal chop on the bridge to keep it fresh. Love the drum variation. So kind of a combo of swing and panning. I don't think it adds swing. And I don't think it plays with the rhythm of your sound at all. I think it's explicitly a panning effect. I could be wrong. Maybe I have to look that up. But it's literally just to make your sounds wider, and do so in a way that doesn't change the nature of the sound. So for example, if you add chorus onto a sound, you'll notice that the actual sound itself will have a different texture quality to it, whereas actually Microshift can do that at times too. It's just, to me, whenever I have like a percussive sound that I want to sort of bring extreme left and right, I'll throw Microshift on it. You can use that on your hi-hats as well to bring a lot more stereo presence if that's something you want to do. But yeah, with this beat here, for the Moha's beat, great layering overall. Musically, everything worked very well together. And I think this is a great example of that idea that I mentioned before, of just like simple plus complex. So with the sort of guitar pattern that was playing underneath, it had a lot of movement, a lot of musicality to it. And so what he did was just create a very simple top line melody with that sort of Fender Rhodes sound. And I think that's exactly why the beat came together and worked very well. He didn't push that Fender Rhodes melody on top to do something extremely crazy and over the top. Just very simple, but in a great way. That's what great design is all about. So I think Moha did a fantastic job there. I think Moha is very skilled at making these types of beats. And I think one thing that I would say maybe to explore Moha is start playing around with parallel compression on your drums. I think your drums, obviously there's nothing wrong with them. They have a very boom bap aesthetic, but to really help explore and take your drums to different places that you might not have thought of, think about parallel compression. I would recommend checking out the videos that I sort of created on modern boom bap beats, the one that has the Alchemist picture on the front. I talk about parallel compression, or maybe it's the Griselda one, and it can just really overhaul your drums and make them sound a lot more rich. And I think that might be something that you would be interested in with the types of beats that you make. Overall, well put together beat. I don't really have anything to say that's negative. It was just very well put together, very smart sampling and arrangement. So kudos to Moha. Last beat of the night eliminated. Let's dive in and let me know what you guys think. That was eliminated. I need to play around with parallel compression more. I just send them all to a drum bus and compress them all together after leveling. Or is that parallel compression? That is parallel compression. I think the idea that can sort of help, I guess, when you send them to a bus, do you still have the original signal going to the master, or do you turn those sounds off? Because parallel compression, the sort of idea is that you have your drums that are sort of playing at their sort of typical state, and then you send them all to one mixer insert, and you also have, so you create like a dual layer of drums, but then for the one that's all sent to the mixer insert, you get a little bit more creative with the effects that you add. You push the sounds and you really compress them together, just so it depends on what settings you use, but it can really create a consistency with your drum sounds because they all sort of get mushed together, and you sort of narrow the gap between when the transient ends and the next one begins, so you can create a little bit more of a cohesion. But depending on the type of effects that you use, you can really overhaul the complete textures and the sounds themselves. So if you watch that video that I mentioned, the drums are sort of like day and night before and after the parallel compression, just because parallel compression can add just so much character and richness to the drums themselves, again depending on which preset or effect that you use. I like the chops of this, but some of the notes are out of key. Love the ethereal style and the pitch down vocal. I like the work with the sample. The vocal chops are very creative. I could hear this on a very early Young Lean album. It got me thinking of Kyoto. The maybe older Schoolboy Q stuff too. Yeah, I think with this beat, at the beginning the sample was a little bit off, just like you mentioned, Corbin. The notes were just sort of out of key, but once it got to the sort of middle point, this beat was like a sort of 3 ideas in one. Once you got to the second idea and the third idea, it sort of started to come together a little bit more. Very awesome work with the vocal sample. I like the shifting ideas and how they're all related. So a lot of the times when people make these types of switch ups, it feels very disjointed between the different sections. But I feel like with this beat here, there was a sort of tied cohesion between the different sections, just because it sounded like he used the same textures and same sounds, but he just sort of arrange them and structure them in a different way, which is very impressive. So that was really cool. But yeah, the first idea didn't really gel together because it sounded like some of the notes from the sample were very off. But the idea itself was really cool. I really love that sort of ethereal, spacey feel. Like you guys mentioned, some sort of like old Schoolboy Q, Earl Sweatshirt type of thing. That would have been a really in their lane. Maybe adding a little bit of high-end presence with some noise, or just maybe removing how much of the high-end got peeled off. It sounded like Eliminated used a little bit of EQing to cut off some of the high-end of the sample. So maybe reintroducing some of those higher frequencies somehow, some way would have been nice, just because it sounded like the only thing that was up there were the hi-hats. And again, they were just very transient, short hi-hats. But yeah, I can definitely hear an artist use this beat. There's just a lot of space and a lot of room. So that was a really cool idea. I'll have to keep a lookout for the next submission from Eliminated. I would have liked to hear a little bit more of a consistent idea, just so I can really review the overall structure and arrangement of a beat idea, as opposed to just having 3 different ideas sort of glued together, which obviously it's not a bad thing, but I would just like to hear what you come up with a more consistent theme. So yeah, that's this review. That was a fun one, guys. I really love doing the sample ones, and I have a really, really great sample picked out for the next one. I think that might even be the next one after the assignment 2, just because I have this really cool sample and I'm excited to sort of share it with you guys. Either way, thank you guys for showing up and submitting as always. We'll be doing this again in 2 weeks. And yeah, that's it. The Better Beatmaker course is going to be reopening in 4 weeks. I have upped the referral bonus to $100. So if you have anyone that you think would want to join and would be a great addition to the gang, Yeah, if you can get them to join, it's 100 smooth ones in your pocket. So yeah, until 2 weeks from now, hope you guys have a good 2 weeks.